Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of A Grande Education. The tea is hot and poured. Linda and I hope you will settle down in your comfy chair with a special cup of something as we reminisce about the original schoolhouses in the county of Grande Prairie.
Some people have been asking about our hats.
Right. Let me explain. Throughout our lives, we do different things and wear many hats. So we decided to take that literally. Today, the toque and baseball cap are pretty common in Alberta, but it used to be that other hats were fashionable back in the day.
We are so fortunate to have been able to borrow hats from Grande Prairie Live Theatre. This one would have been my favorite Sunday morning choice.
And mine was my mother's. It is a cloche, meaning bell in French, and it was a popular style back in the 1920s, not long after schools began to sprout like spring wheat in the county of Grande Prairie.
One of the first schools in the area was Wapiti School. It was in the Dimsdale area, just over 10 kilometers west of Grande Prairie, and operated from 1912 to 1955. A very good year.
By the way, did you know that Wapiti means elk? Very common in our area. Linda visited the old Wapiti School, and she has this to share about its history.
Wapiti School District number 2802 was organized August 10, 1912, under the name of Greystone, but was also known as the Spring Creek School. In January of 1913, the board agreed to borrow $200 to build the school. They purchased a set of prepared logs to be delivered to the school site on the Northeast 8-71-7-W6 for $75 and brought in roofing materials, doors, and windows over the Edson Trail. That spring, the name was officially changed to Wapiti School District number 2802. Soon the board had to arrange for another loan of $800 to complete the school and hire the teacher, Mrs. C. Taylor. In the early years, there was not a full 10-month school term. The minutes of Wapiti School Board show that in January 1915, a motion was made that there be a 6-month term of school for that year, beginning April 1st. 3 years later, the term ran from March 1st to November 30th, with a 2-week vacation in July. One of the early teachers was Maud Westcott Clifford, who was the first female European settler when she arrived in the area in 1906 with her husband Harry to open a store at the Métis settlement of Flying Shot Lake. An enthusiastic botanist, Maud carried on an association with the Dominion Experimental Farm in Ottawa and experimented with crops on the Grande Prairie. She must have been an interesting science teacher. Wapiti School District had a very active board. In the late winter of 1916, they added a stable to the school site. In 1918, a brick chimney from ground to peak was installed in the school, and the round logs hewed square so the building could be sided and painted. Early in 1917, a new stove was purchased that could burn both coal and wood. So now coal had to be supplied as well as wood. The coal came from the mines on the banks of the Wapiti River. In 1921, the board purchased lumber to build a teacher-each. That was the year, too, that parents decided that they would like a report card at the end of each month. In 1937, a new schoolhouse was built, with a basement which contained a coal furnace, coal bin, and play space. Inspector Walker spoke of this school in a letter to the Hall Court Board. Consider this new school is one of the best-built rural schools in the north of the province. Time bears out Inspector Walker's words, for that school is still being used as a residence 70 years later. Enrollment at Wapiti School varied. In 1917, it was already 23 students, and at times the student population became too large for the one-roomed school. Then classes were also taught at the Dimsdale Hall. Wapiti School was active until the policy of consolidation forced all the one-roomed schools to close.
It was exciting for us to go to school. I was an only child, and so going to school was something pretty special because in those days farms were far apart and we all didn't have cars and things, so you didn't see people every day. Roy Houseworth and his wife had an orphanage down there. It was really difficult from what I remember for some of those kids because they were very withdrawn until they got to know, the people that were there and felt a little bit more comfortable. I can remember walking to school in the wintertime and the snow was as high as the fence posts, and then the snowdrifts sometimes were a little bit higher. So there wasn't ever a chance of a car getting down those roads. It was either horse and sleigh or just a horse, and you kind of blazed your own trail to get to school. And then we had a neighbor that lived a half a mile north of us from the school. Between he and I, we'd blaze a trail to school. That's just the way it was. You're going to school, and that school is over there. Get your boots on. Yeah, we arrived at school awful cold some days. By the time we got to school, sometimes our lunch was frozen, and it still stayed frozen in the coat room till lunchtime. We never knew any different, you just put on the long johns, you put on an extra coat, you had overshoes and buckled them up and put your toque on and away you went. We never had to carry books or anything like that. It was just our lunch pails. And in those days, our lunch pails were lard pails. We used to get lard in 5-pound pails from the grocery store, and that's what our lunch pail was. When the lard was gone, that was your lunch pail for this year. A nice yellow one, and then once in a while you got lucky and got a red one. Yes, you were uptown then. After grade 4, we got bused to Harry Belfer School in Grande Prairie. And that was a big deal. It was exciting in a way because we got to ride in a school bus. The downside was we had to get up earlier in the morning, and we got home from school later at night because it was a 10-mile ride into Grande Prairie in those days. The roads weren't always as passable as they could have been because snowplows were at a premium. The road to Grande Prairie was still a gravel road, yes it was. Things for these kids today are so much nicer. There are so much more things available to them to learn and learning practices. And they have the opportunity to draw on one another because there's more kids in the classroom doing the same thing that they're doing. So yeah, that whole system has changed tremendously. And for the better, I will say. We thought we were doing fine the way we were, but ignorance is bliss, I had great gratitude for my grade 4 teacher. She had the discipline, she had the kids at heart, and she knew how to handle each and every one of us on a personal level. The one-room school was a very good learning experience. You had to learn to get along with all ages, all people, and you had chores to do. Things had to be done. You had to parry in wood. You had to do this. You had to do that. So it was a great piece of learning for life as it is. You know, you have to discipline yourself. And that brought great discipline to us. The history of one-room schools is part of our being. It molded our personalities. It molded how we were going to go through life, and just gave us a feeling of well-being. If I had to do it all over again, I would. You know, because, as I say, it was a great learning experience.
Dennis McIntosh was a student at Wapiti School for 7 years, from 1934 to 1941. His story was captured by his daughter, Sherida Russell, and is being read by Misha Albert.
Some of the things, as best I remember, of Wapiti School that I attended from September 1934 until June of 1941. The school was located 1.5 miles west of the hamlet of Dimsdale. There was no Dimsdale at that time. After the railroad arrived in 1924, the hamlet developed and was named after Henry Dimsdale, a railroad engineer. Settlers started arriving in 1910 with young families, so a school was needed. In April of 1913, the Minister of Education renamed it Wapiti. There was the school, a small teacherage for the teacher to live in, 2 outhouses, and a barn for the horses. The school was of log construction, with windows on the south side, a porch entrance on the east side. I started grade 1 in September 1934 with Ellen McQuarrie as teacher. I don't remember how many pupils there were, grades 1 to 9, but I do remember 2 other boys, myself, and 1 girl in grade 1. In grades 2 and 3, I had Miss Campbell as teacher. I have fond memories of her. This was the last year of the old log school, which was replaced with a new school in 1937. Some of the things I remember about the old school. The old barrel stove, wood burning, surrounded by a metal guard to keep us back. In the winter, the building was so cold you would cook on one side and freeze on the other. The ink wells would freeze solid. There were several rows of wooden desks, all attached to runners, so that when one desk moved, the whole row moved. Smaller desks at the front and larger ones at the back. There was a shelf on the east wall to hold our lunch pails. On cold days, we ate frozen lunches. The floors were a bit rough and were oiled once a year, I suppose to keep the dust down. We had blackboards on the west and north walls, used white chalk and brushes. Oh, it was fun for the younger ones to take the dirty brushes outside and pump, 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 bang them together to get rid of the chalk dust. I remember a rather large globe of the world. I really enjoyed studying all the countries of the world and maybe learned a little. We enjoyed our lunchtime in the cold weather when we had hot soup and hot chocolate. The parents provided the vegetables, milk, etc., and the teacher, with the help of the older students, did the preparation. One other highlight I remember from the old school was a couple of bull fights. People from southeast and people from the north each had a big shorthorn bull. I can remember them meeting at the schoolyard and getting into a fight. Oh, it was scary, but good entertainment. Our transportation was walking, horseback, or team and cutter in the winter, or buggy in the summer. We made our own entertainment, mostly ball games in the summer, winter sports, fox and goose, etc. In the summer of 1937, a new school was built. It was a frame construction with 10-foot walls, full cement basement complete with wood coal furnace, which was gratefully accepted. There was a large playroom in the basement, which also was used by the community for events such as card games. The main floor contained the large classroom and 2 cloakrooms. I have often wondered where the money came from, especially at this time during the Depression. Each teacher had their own strong points. Mr. Fletcher was strong on athletics. He had us do many things. One was building pyramids, which we did at the Christmas concert. Mr. Miller got the boys started in hockey. We had a team. Not a very good one. That played a few games with the Percy School. The school still stands on the same spot, but it looks a little different now as a home.
Interesting that schools were often called schoolhouses because that's exactly what happened to Wapiti School after it closed. I know it well because my brother lived in there for a few years.
Did he now?
Yes. The current owner is Rodney Pierce. Rodney has modernized the building in recent years, but he loves the stories behind it. The 1937 poured cement basement is still intact, as is the red brick chimney that ran all the way to the basement floor. Some of you who went to the school might remember the wood slat wall on one end. That's there too. Rodney plans to maintain as much of the buildings and the yard's historical integrity as possible, including the outhouse.
My grandparents actually bought the schoolhouse where they had met when they retired and made that their home, so it gives it a little bit of feel for my grandparents and makes me think of them every once in a while. You know, people stop in from time to time that have had something to do with this old schoolhouse, and it's amazing to hear the stuff that they remember and they can tell me. And
the stories.
yes, yes. No amount of money can preserve that kind of memory. Like, it's just something that people should start doing more of, is taking care of the history of our country. I see old churches and old schools just leaning over, the windows broke out, and if they only knew the amount of craftsmanship and the quality of construction of those buildings and what was in people's minds and hearts when they were building them, they'd take better care of them. Like, it's a shame. Well, no, it's not an old building. Every old building tells stories, and if you look hard enough, it'll tell you a story.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the stories of Wapiti School.
Next time, we'll be talking about Hermit Lake, Percy, and McHenry schools. Remember to invite your friends to join you to watch.
We acknowledge that we live and film on Treaty 8 territory, the ancestral and present-day home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We are grateful to work, live, and learn on the traditional territory of Duncan First Nation, Horse Lake First Nation, and Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation, who are the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge the history of this land, and we are thankful for the opportunity to walk together in friendship, where we will encourage and promote positive change for present and future generations.
That is a very special and meaningful statement for us and for our project.